Now I'm live.
Yay!
Hey, welcome to Ministry Mondays with me.
Yay!
Yay! And I'm here with my friends. Oh, look, I got sound effects. Look, my friend.
Ooh.
Isn't that? I got sound effects.
Nice.
I am here with my friend and colleague, but also friend of the podcast and all those things. I guess under your pen name, Melinda Mitchell, Reverend Mindi, also known as Mindi Welton-Mitchell, and author and let's see, mom, wife, and executive minister of Wisconsin, cheese eater,
Cheese lover.
cheese lover, and I'm trying to think. Oh, hockey lover. I'm trying to think about all the things I know. So why don't, if somebody doesn't know you, like I'm not sure how they don't know you, but like if they don't, why don't you tell them things that I didn't cover or do a better job than I did?
Sure. I feel like there might be a little bit of an internet delay. I'm not sure what's going on, if it's my internet or yours, but since we went live, I'm now like, I don't know if I look slow on your side, but I look slow on my side. So I'm just sharing that.
Okay.
Yeah. If I look good on your side, then don't worry about it.
I'm recording it locally, so like it's supposed to record us on both ends.
Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry, people who are watching, but I'm seeing my mouth move like 2 seconds after I'm speaking. So we'll just go with it. Yeah. So I am an author of science fiction and fantasy, and also a regional executive minister. As Meg shared, I have lived all over. I grew up in Alaska and now live in Wisconsin. So winters are about the same, just no mountains. And I have been interested long in the intersection of science fiction and theology. And in fact, Paul Schneider, Reverend Paul Schneider from the Evergreen Association, I have co-written 2 academic papers on the subject and presented them at the American Baptist Theologians Conference in the past. So this is an interest of mine, of seeing where science fiction, the imagination of science fiction, can take us in our understanding of some of the basic values that we have in our world and where we see them going. And so I enjoy writing science fiction.
Yeah. And you do it well. I mean, I'm you do well. So this is book number
2. So just a little caveat. You do not have to have read the first book. Meg is holding the second one, Fortunate Son. Mm-hmm. So the first book is called Next of Kin. And the first book was a sci-fi retelling of the story of Ruth. And it is no longer in print for various reasons. And I had to move publishers. So the new publisher is awesome. And we just decided to restart the series, which was perfect because it's really a new story that's starting. And it takes place several generations after Next of Kin as a Ruth retelling. So think of it as a prequel that if you did read it, you'll have Easter eggs for understanding Fortunate Son, but you do not have to have read it. But Fortunate Son is a sci-fi retelling of the David story. And as you can see, the front cover depicts one of the scenes early on in the book, within the first about 100 pages. And as you can imagine, that is the David and Goliath scene. But it's told as a mech battle. So if you are into anime or Transformers or Pacific Rim or Iron Widow or any of those, there's some elements that kind of will remind you of that while retelling a biblical story. And what I mean by retelling is I have taken kind of the main characters and some of the story beats and have made a science fiction story of it. But it's obviously not the Bible. I just want to make that clear. Read your Bible. But that's actually one of the great things, is there's a quote on the back of the book. If you read that, Meg, I don't know if you saw that, but the very first quote on the back of the book is from LaShawn Wynack, who is the editor of the science fiction fantasy magazine Gigo Notosaurus, and she is a science fiction and fantasy author herself. And she read an early version of this book, and the quote actually began with an expletive. We did not put that on the book, but it said, "Fortunate Son made me want to read the Bible again." And that's kind of the whole point, is I am hoping through storytelling and through our imagination, we start seeing the values in these stories, because I do think we are in a world that is less biblically literate than it has been. And there's various reasons for that. You know, I think it is wise as a Baptist to keep our separation of church and state. But I do feel like our churches don't always do a great job of teaching the Bible, and fear people going to church. They know the David and Goliath story, but they don't know the rest of it. They don't know about David's relationship with Jonathan. They don't know about the fact that Michal was Jonathan's youngest sister and the daughter of Saul, and he was married to her, and some of the politics that were at play in these relationships. And I think that once you start reading the science fiction story, it makes you ask the questions of the text. And that was, like, I think one of the big things is, what questions does this kind of a storytelling make us think, go back to the text and ask those questions of it? Like, you know, why were these people doing these things? You know, and when you're writing fiction, you take creative license. You know, there's some things that I had to shift around, and there's some things you have to do for publishing sake in terms of making the market. I talked about this with my first book, Next of Kin, because it was really a science fiction romance story. So there's the romance line. Well, in a romance book, the two main characters, the lovers, have to meet by page 50. That is just a rule of the market. And if you're going to be writing this whole long story before she gets to meet Boaz, it's not going to work. You have to have them meet earlier on. So you have to shift some things in the story. The same thing with writing any other story. You're going to have to make sure that that it will match what's out in the market, in terms, so that booksellers know where to put your book. They need to know what genre it is. They need to know if it's for young adult or is it for adult. It needs to meet certain milestones, certain marks, in order to be marketed. So that being said, I do think that Fortunate Son, hopefully, will get people curious about the source text and go back to it.
I'll just say, so, because it's me, I have a note card in my book where I started, like, going, okay, so we've got King Saul, and then, like, doing as, like, I was in the beginning, like, guessing relationship kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Like drawing my line and going, because, you know, it's been a hot second since I've read all of that. And
yeah.
Going, oh yeah, I forgot about that thing, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, go back to 1 Samuel and you'll find some of those things. And I made it easy because I kept Saul's name, because the other thing is, yes, I was thinking of Saul from the Bible, but I also was thinking, if any of you watched the Battlestar Galactica reboot from the early 2000s, Saul Tigh was one of the characters. He was the XO, and he was a flawed leader character, and with different motivations. And so I kind of channeled a bit of that Saul, of Saul Tigh, into King Saul. So,
well, I read the first one, and I'm not finished yet with the second one. But as I said before we started, it is really good. I mean, like, I'm enjoying it, and I have to put a little timer on to tell myself to stop and do something else, because it just, I don't know, it's same author, but something about this one has just, like, drawn me in, and in a really, really, in a really great way.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
So you did your first book, you've had to switch publishers, things like that.
Yes.
So then what is it like when you sit down to write book 2? Like, are you going, is it hard to get started? Do you have to stop yourself in book 1 to not write book 2? I mean, like, what's that?
So book 1, Next of Kin, I actually wrote the early drafts of that back in 2016, 2017, which is great because it was dealing with kind of immigration and being a refugee, and we were dealing with that in 2016, 2017, and I was trying to go through the traditional market, which is getting a literary agent and then getting a publishing contract with one of the bigger publishers, and I wasn't having much luck. But when I was going to writing conferences and I would meet with agents, they were like, well, that sounds interesting. And then I would say, and the second book is going to be King David's story. And they'd be like, tell me more. So I realized that the first book might not sell. So I started writing it as a standalone and writing the second one as one could take off, because I thought maybe if I sold the second one first, they could go back and publish the first one as a prequel. Flash forward about 5-6 years. Well, it was 2023. So yeah, about 6 years later from 2017, I had written a draft of Fortunate Son, but I had paused it until, trying to figure things out. In 2020, I had signed a contract with a small press publisher for Next of Kin, but that press ended up folding in a year because of COVID and things. And then I found another small press publisher who really wanted Next of Kin. They loved it. And so that's when it came out in 2023. But when I submitted book 2, they weren't interested in it. They were not interested in Fortunate Son. So I had to make a decision whether to stay with them or move on. And I decided to move on. And there were some other issues too, but I won't get into that. And so I submitted Fortunate Son to Not a Pipe Publishing. I had met one of the owners one time, and he had read Next of Kin and loved it. So I said, hey, would you be interested in Fortunate Son? He wrote me back the next day, said yes. And a week later, he sent me a contract. So it happened very quickly. He really liked it. And the hope is that if this one sells well, I'm already working on book 3. And which is book 3 is more of a direct continuation. It's a continuation of the King David story. So this one, I don't want to spoil it. Like Meg and I were talking before this when we went live. We don't want to spoil it too much, but the story continues. It does not finish with book 1, but it is satisfying enough that if you can read this now, you'll have a satisfying conclusion. But book 2 will pick up and continue the story.
Oh, so good.
Yeah. So it'll be book 3. It gets confusing, but it'll be book 2 with this publisher. And again, I try to write them so you don't have to necessarily read them in order. You can pick it up and read it and then go, I wonder what happens before. And, and as I said, Next of Kin is out of print, but I have been told there's some used copies on Amazon. And I know that Black Birch Books in Wasilla, Alaska still has 2 copies that are new. It's the one bookstore so far that has carried my books in shop. It's hard to get into bookstores because there are so many books and so many authors out there. But they have a thing for local authors, and where I grew up there, they consider me a local author. So,
gotcha.
But anyways, yeah. So I've started writing. I've started writing book 3, which will be a continuation of the David series and the David story. And I have ideas for a book 4, 5, and 6. Which will also be biblical retellings, probably not the David story. Although I have to say book 3 is getting on the long side, and we'll have to see. I haven't had much time to write. Some of you know, I moved houses and went to Tijuana on a mission trip and did a whole lot of other stuff. So writing has been on the back burner. But book 3 was starting to get on the long side, and I was debating whether to split it into 2 books. So we'll see what happens. Sometimes the editing process, it takes care of itself. You end up cutting extraneous chapters. I mean, Fortunate Son originally had 5 chapters that got cut out of it, because that happens.
Wow.
Yeah, there were 3 chapters that happened before the beginning. I had talked with somebody about them, and my early readers loved them. They thought it set up the book well, but I had a couple readers who thought, you do better to start with Armis, who is my David character, and start with him and go from there. And so that's where it starts now. So I cut 3 chapters, and then there were a couple of chapters that were later on. Actually, I think I cut 6 chapters. There were some chapters that were great fillers, but not much happened. And sometimes you have that, where you're like, oh, this is good.
Yeah.
It adds to the characters, but it just delays the action that needs to happen. So that happens in the editing process. You end up deciding, oh, I don't need those chapters. So
when you created a character like Armis, like, do you have a person in mind when you?
No, not really. I try not to model anybody after anyone in real life, except King Saul did, was with another character, Saul Ty from Battlestar Galactica. There was a little bit of that. And I've had, there's been sometimes some actors who I'm like, ooh, if this was ever picked up by, some movie studio, that would be a great actor to play. But you don't go too far into that. And you also don't give too much physical description because people get images in their minds. And I remember, when certain books get adapted into movies, people sometimes are outraged by who gets chosen to play them because they didn't read the character description carefully enough to recognize that this was a person of color and not a white person. Or they just have a different image in their mind. So I don't try to give too much description. I like to let you have that image in your mind. I will do hair color, size, skin tone, eyes, as much as I can. But then you get I have one friend who was like, I'm 300 pages in and I can't remember what this character's eye color is, and I just don't care anymore. And it's like, you know what? We don't care either. We don't think about the fact. I don't think about the fact. I'm like, Meg, what color are your eyes? I don't think about that fact all the time. And actually, I'm not sure what color your eyes are. Are they brown?
They're brown.
They're brown. Okay.
They're brown. Yeah.
But you don't think about that as a regular basis. So you try to leave those out.
Yeah.
But overall, I mean, the case with Armis, because he is the David character, we know that David was ruddy, handsome, and ruddy is reddish. So you give him red hair, and a lot of depictions of him have red hair. So he has red hair in the book. But the rest of him, I try to make sure that there's a diversity of characters, not just in looks, but in culture and language and art and different things to reflect the diversity of the world we are in.
Yeah. And don't steer away from LGBT issues. And
I know that is going to be that might be somewhat controversial for some readers. A lot of biblical scholars have read David loved Jonathan. It's very clear he loved Jonathan more than any other woman. So I made that clear in there. I also include non-binary and trans characters because this is the world we are in, and they are real people, and we don't know or understand necessarily gender and sexuality as much in the Bible as we think we do. Our Jewish friends and Jewish scholars have always understood there was more than just male and female in the text, and I try not to go too heavy into that because I know some people would be confused or just whatever. But I do try to include the diversity. If this is the world we are in, this was the world that the Bible was in, we need to understand that our views that are mostly the last couple centuries that we have applied to the Bible and looked through, our lens to the Bible may not have been there 2,500, 3,000 years ago. Right. And so just bringing that up, plus it's science fiction, so it's actually in the future, so or a galaxy far, far away. So we just need to be aware that there's going to be diversity in that. We already know that there was diversity in marriage, that David had more than one wife. All people in Israel had more than one wife. This was normal in that time period, and especially in the upper echelons of the society, because you had to have heirs. So that's in there already. And the David and Jonathan relationship is pretty clear in there. So I've left that in there. And we'll see how people read it and understand it. The Bible's pretty graphic. Yeah. Let's just say. So there are some adult scenes in this book, but just be thankful that I did not include the story of David paying the bride price for Michal. And I'm going to leave that there. You can go look that up in First Samuel.
I was going to say, if you don't know what that means, you can look that up yourself, because
yeah, I decided nope, I'm not going there, and I left that scene out. And there are some things like that, because the Bible's really graphic, and even our English tones it down some. I remember my Hebrew Bible professor in seminary talking about how in certain Orthodox Jewish schools, men aren't allowed to read parts of Ezekiel until they're 35 and older, because it's so graphic. It is so graphic, and in the Hebrew, and we have toned it down in the English. And it's really, I mean, it's pretty derogatory towards women, because Israel's personified as a woman, Judah's personified as women, and what happens to them. So I don't want to go there. So there's some things that, I'm not going to go to. But if anyone is upset by the way this story is told, just remind them of the parts I did not tell.
That is an excellent point. I mean, really. Yeah, because I think people really do forget, or they just glossed over all of that. And yeah, you're right. It's a great representation of the world we live in now.
Mm-hmm. And the representation of the world that was,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The ancient Near East was pretty diverse. You had trade routes going through, you had people. I mean, I just was reading Esther in my daily devotional, and it's talking about India and Persia, and the trade routes and the roads, and going to we know that Egypt and parts of Africa. So we know that there was a diversity of people in the ancient Near East, and we don't always represent that. And part of that's a failure of our European art from the Renaissance that depicts Bible scenes, and we have somehow managed to believe that's how it was, rather than understanding that was a 14th, 15th, 16th century interpretation of the events. So I think it's important to remember the world back then was also very diverse, and there were diverse cultures. And even within Judaism at that time, there was a diversity of understanding of worship, local worship versus temple worship, local traditions versus the traditions of Judah that became more dominant, especially after the exile. But there were these traditions from the north, some of them lost over the years. And I think it's important to remember the diversity of the people at that time. It's not, and today, no group is a monolith.
Yes, I agree. So what has this whole experience, this being this published author, like, what have you learned about yourself with this process?
Yeah, I think for me, it's been one of my dreams. So I always tell people, when I was 13, I felt the call of God and knew I was going to be a pastor. But when I was 8 years old, I felt like I was going to be a writer. So I've always understood those two pieces to be intertwined. I was going to be a writer, and I was going to be a pastor. I actually majored in college with creative writing degree, and then went on into ministry. And it's funny, because some point in my senior year of college, I kind of decided I needed to leave fiction behind and go to nonfiction, because I just had this mindset that to be a pastor, I was going to be preaching, I was going to be writing articles, I was going to be doing. So I stopped writing fiction, I stopped writing poetry, and went more into nonfiction essays. So my writings from the time I graduated in 99, all the way up until like 2012, 2013, were primarily church related or ministry related, or, focused on that. And then something happened around 2014. I think I started reading fiction again, and I really enjoyed it. I read The Hunger Games because everybody was reading it. My husband actually read them first and was like, you need to read these books. And I was like, oh, I love fiction. I've always loved fiction. And so I started writing a fiction story. It was the story of a clergywoman in her first years of ministry. And I learned a lot from that process. I started going to writing conferences, and I learned, I'm not beginning my story right. I'm giving you all this filler. It does not go anywhere. It's a story that will never see the light of day, but there have been certain scenes or certain moments that have been taken out of that and put in other books. But I wrote that one, and then I started going to writing conferences, and I met these science fiction and fantasy authors, and I went, I've always loved sci-fi and fantasy. That's what I primarily read. Why am I not writing that? Why am I trying to write something that's not what I really, I mean, I do enjoy some contemporary fiction. I read pretty widely, which is also a good thing. If you're a writer, read widely. If you want to be a writer, read widely. Read outside of your genre so you understand different stories and understand and see what's similar and what's different. And I think it just clicked for me. Like after I read The Hunger Games and wrote the first story, I went, I want to write fiction. So I started writing another book that I had actually, a fiction fantasy book that I started writing in high school, put aside. I'm actually still working on it now, so maybe it will someday see the light of day. But then the third book, the third story I ever wrote was Next of Kin. So which is not, that's actually a little bit more unusual. A lot of people don't get their first few books published. It's further down the road. So in some ways, it's funny because if you'd asked me a few years ago, I would have said, oh, it's taking forever, this publishing journey. I don't know. Because I had this idea I had to be published by the time I was 40 or I had failed. I don't even know where I got that idea. I'm 48 now. And I meet a lot of authors who are my age, who are just starting out, who are getting in there. And a lot of authors who did get publishing deals in their 20s and 30s and then had a dry spell for a long time because the publishing markets have changed. It's harder to get a literary agent. It's harder to get into the traditional publishing. And I found the small publishing company, you get a little bit more say in editing and in your cover art than you do with a big publisher. I know friends who they maybe get one look at their cover art and get to suggest, one set of changes and then it's done. They don't get any other chance. Where I got to see I think 5 versions of the Fortunate Son cover. And you can look at it online, but when you get it in person, it looks even better.
It's really cool.
Yeah, it looks really, it's more of a painting and it looks sort of 3D in a sense. Oh, and the hardcover. I've got a hardcover here. It's even better. It just is so I know my camera's blurring it out, but it's just amazing. So you get more say with small publishers. So those are some things I learned. The other thing that I would say that I learned the most is that publishing is not the be all and end all. I don't make money from publishing. Really. I've never made enough that it's made any sort of difference even on taxes. So it's, you don't get a lot for publishing. You don't get a lot in royalties, but you get your book out there. And that's, to me, the important thing. And I'm really thankful that my publisher has distributed my book pretty well. You can find it in all online booksellers. I'm going to put a plug in for bookshop.org because it's not one of the big ones. And also the publisher's website right now, you can get Fortunate Son, the paperback and the hardcover are 25% off. So
okay.
You can also get it in ebook from either Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
And we'll make sure we put those in the show links. If you're watching, I know we've had people hopping on, off because I've been watching, but if you're watching and you want a chance to win the book, put your name down in the comments and we'll draw one. So that's why people have gone to the whole self-publishing model thing is because the publishing has changed so much. Is that it?
Yeah, there's a lot of people who go to self-publishing because traditional publishing can take a long time. You can sign a contract and your book might not come out for a couple more years. And your book may go through several different hands. In terms of editors, and then I know several friends who have had editors change midway through the book because the company downsized, and then you're working with somebody completely different than who you started with, and that can be difficult. Not to say, the traditional publishing route is how you're going to get in the big stores. So if you want to see your book in Barnes & Noble, most of the time that's the way you're going to go. if you want to see your book advertised in major magazines, newspapers, online, you're going to go with, a big publisher is going to put money into promoting. Maybe not as much as they once did, but they will still do that. So there's nothing, if you want to, for anyone out there who's thinking of writing, if you want to pursue that, please, go for it. I'm actually with the fantasy book that I started. I am still kind of trying to find an agent and go the traditional route first. I think it's good to do that, but the small press, you can often pitch directly to them without an agent. It's a shorter turnaround time, usually within a year or less. Like I said, you won't make as much money, but that's, for me, it's more, I wanted to get these stories out there and get these books out there. And I think that's the important part. And you will make some money. I don't want to. If my publisher's listening, I really appreciate you. So I'm not trying to discourage people.
I had somebody on the show earlier this year who was like, you're either you have like two goals. Either you're just happy to get published, and your goal is to make enough money that you can take your family out to a nice dinner. Or if it does really well, you could take your family on vacation. And he says, and what that vacation entails depends on how well you do. Vacation may be camping in the backyard,
Yeah. And I would say, I've probably been able to take my family out to a nice dinner. And I would also say, I know friends who are traditionally published, and when you're traditionally published, you get an advance on the royalties up front. And one of my friends said the advance was enough to pay for the furnace when it went out in the house 2 months after the book came out. So, that's, usually what happens, right?
I mean, if it takes care of what it needs to take care of, then.
Yeah. And I think I've had one friend in all my time, including friends published with the traditional publishers and things, who have actually been able to quit their day job. I think I've had one out of hundreds of people I know. So the real thing is, do you have a passion to write? Do you have a story to write? And are you willing to work on your craft, and face rejection as part of the process? Rejection does not mean you're a bad writer. Rejection may be the story still has some work, or it may mean this is just not the right fit. Sometimes that happens, and somebody says this is not the right story for me, because an agent wants to champion your book. They want to love your book to the point that they are willing to do whatever it takes to get the book published. And if they don't love your book, they're not going to take you on. I remember talking to an agent who receives something like 11,000 query letters a year, which is just, I don't know how she, manages that. She said she requests about, between 50 and 100 manuscripts a year, like partial, like first few chapters. She requests, I think she said, about 20 full manuscripts a year. So that's out of 11,000, and then signs 1 or 2 clients.
Wow.
So it's really hard. So now, and then the other thing that's part of the problem is AI. AI is flooding the markets. People are out there to make money, so they are using AI to write stories, and publishers can tell, agents can tell, they can tell right away that this is an AI story, but it's filling up the inboxes to the point that I know at least some of the small markets, like journals and magazines for fiction, have had to shut down their process for a while, to shut down their submissions because they just got overwhelmed with AI submissions. So yeah, it makes it hard. And then you do run into, now some people are rejecting stories that sound like AI but are not. But usually you can prove that it's not AI. So that's, I don't think that's as big of a problem. But the issue with AI flooding the markets is. So, and then that's the problem with Amazon, is you might get bestsellers out there, and some of them find out really quickly they're just plagiarized of other books, or they're AI slop. So yeah. That's the downside right now. But I do think, like, for me, getting your book out there, having people read it, and having people really enjoy it is just, to me, that's the icing on the cake. That's why I write. And like I said, for The Fortunate Son and Next of Kin, having people want to go back to the original source material and go, what really happened here? What's in the scripture? What does scripture say? What are the questions I have of the text? I think that, to me, is like, that's the best part, is that people are reading this wanting to know more, wanting to learn more, wanting to dive in.
And I don't think you have to be a sci-fi nerd to read the book. I mean, yeah, I enjoy Doctor Who, yes, but I'm not as big as sci-fi nerd as other people, but this is still like, it draws you in, really.
Yeah, you do not have to be a fan of science fiction to enjoy this story. As long as you've got, kind of an imagination and can go in. A lot of people out there like Star Wars, and if you don't like Star Wars, you can still read it. But you don't have to be and I'm sorry, this is going to sound okay. Star Wars fans, there are some of us who are totally into it, and there's some people who just enjoy it. I'm probably leaning on the totally into it, and that I've watched all the animated series and, read some of the books and the tie-in novels and things. Also, and my screen is blurred out, but I have some collector items up on top of my shelves here. I have a Han and Leia from the 1997 re-release that's still in the box. But some people just enjoy watching Star Wars, and they see it once and they're like, yeah, I enjoyed that. Or, they just have enjoyed a sci-fi. If that's your level of enjoyment, you'll love this book, I think. You do not have to be big into it. And I don't go into too technical. This is not hard science fiction. This is what I would, this is not hard science fiction. You don't have to understand how things are supposed to work. I do not explain how their engines work. How they travel between star systems, how they disobey the laws of physics. I do not explain any of that. So it's not hard science fiction. This is enjoyment. It is a story. It is an epic story to be told. And there's some fantastical elements to it. But if you know the story of Saul, this is in the Bible, so this shouldn't be a spoiler for the book. But Saul consults a medium and has a vision of, the prophet Samuel, who has passed. And there is a similar scene in this book that does not totally get explained. And some of that is sort of the fantastical element of it that's in the Bible. So,
right.
Yeah.
Is if anybody else is watching and you want to go in the drawing for the free book, please put your name in the comments, because we're gonna draw here in just a few minutes, which is really exciting. Hi, Angie Jackson.
Angie Jackson. Good. We got it. Hey, good. We got one last person.
Yay. Yeah. Wow. And so, do you I know as like the executive minister that a lot of times you preach when you go to different churches. Do you incorporate your material in your sermons?
I do not in this case. So one of the things I have been very clear is to keep these are two separate jobs, right? My writing job, because I do earn some money from it, and my ministry job, and they're separate. So I am very clear about my ethical boundaries in this. So in fact, you will never see in any of my newsletters anything from the region office or anything about my fiction writing. Some of my pastors and some of church members know because they're friends with me on Facebook, and I'm very clear on that. My personal Facebook page is mine. It does not necessarily express any opinions of the region. I don't do any of that, so I don't advertise I did a workshop, really, like we have this program called Teaching Pastors Forum, where different pastors have a passion project and they share it with other pastors in our region. About once a month we have lunch. I ended up leading one on writing, and I talked about writing for the Christian Citizen, writing for the American Baptist Quarterly, and writing for different journals, and shared about some other Baptist authors I know who have been printed in Baptist News Global and Good Faith Media and other places. And at the very end, I said, if you are interested in knowing more about fiction, I do write science fiction and I have a book coming out. But I said that at the very end and didn't say anything more because I really do want to be ethical about this. I also don't want anyone, there may be some people who do not like what I have done with this story in Fortunate Son. And I understand that, and people of faith, and I do not want to have anything come between me and my, ability to serve as a regional minister because they didn't like my book, or were offended by something or something bothered them. I want to make sure, so I don't promote it at all here. But if people ask me about it, I do share about it, and and that's a separate. But I really do try to keep it separate and try to keep boundaries, ethical boundaries for that. I know other pastors out there do have books, and if you have a book that's related to ministry, it's a whole different ball game. I will say though, in my preaching, I have brought in science fiction references before. I mean, that just happens.
Right.
And especially when I was a local pastor, that happened a lot more often. At the regional level, it just depends on the circumstance and the situation, whether I bring something in. I think I've done more Marvel references recently because I know people have seen the Marvel movies, and but yeah. So there is one thing I did want to share about Fortunate Son that so people know there's 3 points of view in the book. You have of the characters in the Bible, you have a David character who is Armis. You have Jonathan, who is John. I kept some names. And then the Michal character is Kyla. And one of the things I think that is really interesting is if you read 1 Samuel into 2 Samuel, you will know that Michal doesn't have a whole lot of agency. She is the youngest daughter of Saul, Jonathan's youngest sister. The scripture tells us she was in love with David. And then Saul had her marry David because Saul kind of wanted to control. That way David's, under his, son-in-law, under his, household. Then Saul decides he wants to kill David. Michal helps him escape. That's all in the Bible. Michal helps him escape. And then Michal is actually married off to somebody else. And then you don't hear from her until 2 Samuel, after Saul and Jonathan are dead, David is crowned king. It's all of a sudden like David remembers, oh yeah, I have this other wife, because he's married to 2 other women by then. So then he has her brought back. And it's very clear in the scripture. She's brought back to legitimize his claim to the throne because she's Jonathan's dead, Saul's dead, the sons are dead. But there is a son of Jonathan that lives but is disabled, and so will not be an heir. So in order to legitimize it, he needs Michal. And then there's the famous story in 2 Samuel where, I think it's chapter 6, where she's gazing out and David is dancing before the throne naked, and there's women out there, and she despises him. And it says in the scripture that she never had children again. And I like to say, girl, I get you. I would swear off men for the rest of my life too. So I wanted to give Michal more agency in my story. So Kyla, I think, has a very interesting storyline, and not to give it away, but I think she is still affected by the choices men make in her life because that's the reality, but she forges her own path. And she still I feel stays true to some of the way she is expressed in the Bible in terms of her feelings and emotions and those points where we do actually see her. But it's very sci-fi and you'll have to read more, but I really loved including her point of view. And just, slight spoiler alert, her point of view continues in the 3rd book. Again, it's the second, it's this direct sequel of this one. So it'll be the second book, but if you have the first book, it's the third one. And again, you don't have to have read the first one. You can start with this one. But the third book will be all women point of view.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's 4 points of view, all women.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying Princess Kyla's character. It is. I appreciate her very much. Which, see, I would have spoiled the whole stinking thing. This is why I didn't finish the book. But now that we've done this, now I can go and finish my book.
Finish it. And those of you who have read, please, or if you haven't read it, when you do, please leave reviews. Review it on, and if you have an Amazon account, even if you didn't buy it from Amazon, review it there, so that it can, because Amazon unfortunately still drives the market a lot. But if you use Goodreads, which is also owned by Amazon, or Storygraph, which is independent, you can leave reviews there. You can leave reviews at Barnes & Noble, Bookshop, wherever you have, purchased the book. Reviews help with sales and help with getting, the book out there. So I appreciate that. That's one way you can help your local indie author, myself, or any other indie authors, whether self-published or through small press like Judson Press. If you are published through Judson Press, if you love authors who are published through Judson Press, review their books. It helps their books. So please review your authors. So leave the review. It can be short. My very first book has like 45 ratings on Goodreads and Amazon or something. Has great ratings, but my favorite review is the shortest one, Travis Norvell. It's a great book.
That's what he wrote?
That's all he wrote. This is a great book. It was 5 words. This is a great book.
Wow.
Other people went into detail about world building or what they loved about it or whatever. He just said, this is a great book.
You should put that on a t-shirt or something.
I should.
Like,
oh, speaking of t-shirts, it's not official yet. I mean, it is official, but I haven't seen it yet. My publisher, Not a Pipe Publishing, so notapipepublishing.com, is going to have swag related to this series. Is called the Stardust and Ashes series. So there will be mugs and shirts, Stardust and Ashes, maybe even a throw pillow, I've heard. So I mean, I don't know who would buy that besides me. I would love it. But there's going to be some swag related to that. So
you never know. People get excited about t-shirts and
it'll say Stardust and Ashes because that's the name of the series. That's also kind of their colloquial.
Yeah.
Darn it! It's Stardust and Ashes.
I know.
So that will be on some swag. So there will be some swag related to the books, which is super exciting. That's just great.
So we had a couple of people put their names in the
okay.
comments. So I ran the little beep 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 beep. Not that you can tell, but
okay. Do you have a drum roll sound effect?
I have a drum roll sound effect. Okay, I love this. Like, by the way, this. Thank you for StreamYard for adding this drum roll and fanfare, please. We have a winner, Pastora Ramona de la Cruz.
Congratulations.
If you will get us your contact information.
Yeah, you can send it to Meg or me. Send me your address. And if you would like the book personalized to you, or if you're giving it as a gift, please let me know, because I will sign it and I will get it in the mail to you this week. So you should get it soon. And
I will put, for those listening later, watching later, I'll put the links to your publisher's website, Amazon, to the bookshop. Was it bookshop, right? Bookshop.org. Yep. They are a great alternative to Amazon if you are not shopping the big stores. Bookshop is basically connecting indie bookstores. You can also go to your local. This is actually the really cool thing. Go to your local bookstore. If you have a local indie bookstore, tell them you want to find that you would like a copy of Fortunate Son by Melinda Mitchell. That's you just need my name, because there's a few other books titled Fortunate Son. There's also a famous song titled
Fortunate Son, which I will admit does get in my head. But you go to your local bookstore, you can request Fortunate Son, Melinda Mitchell, and they can order it for you. And generally, that will not charge you shipping. It will come right to the bookstore, and you can get it. And it's also possible that they will order extra copies for their bookstore. So that's a great way to do it. If you don't do that, you can do bookshop.org. You can get the ebook on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. You should be able to get the ebook on Bookshop, but I haven't seen it yet because they also will do ebooks. The other thing you could do, if you don't have money, go to your local library, request it. That's actually an amazing thing you can do. And I know Next of Kin is in a couple of public libraries. So that's another way. If you want to read that first one, you can do interlibrary loan and request Next of Kin. But you can also request Fortunate Son through your library and see if they will get copies, and you can read it that way. And they should be able to request the ebook that way too. So that's also, I love that. I want more people to read the book. So if you don't have money, go to your library, request it. That is totally like one of the coolest things you can do, because then you're opening it up to possibility of other readers finding it.
Yeah. And usually libraries, I know, are pretty great about getting your books, and fairly quickly at least, for you. So I've done that a few times myself. But I'm also one of those people who like the physical books and like to write in them and everything else. So, there's that. But that's just me. Anything else we should know before we wrap this thing up?
No, I think that's it. There's it's just been really fun writing these books. So yeah, I am working on the third book. I am behind my own schedule. I had hoped to have a draft done before the end of the year, but with moving and things, it didn't happen. But hopefully that will not take too long, and we'll have another book in another year. And
turkeys at the new house?
Yes. Thanksgiving. Oh.
No, like the turkeys in the front yard.
No, that was the old house. We haven't seen turkeys. The new house, we've only seen a bunny rabbit. Yeah, the old house, we used to have turkeys and deer that always were wandering through. The old house was on a street circle, and so there was a wooded area, and so we had a lot of wildlife there. In fact, my husband saw the first week we moved in, we saw a coyote, and last week when we were closing up the rental house, we saw a coyote. So my husband saw one. So yeah, but we don't have any. We've only seen a bunny rabbit so far at the new house. We're in a more dense neighborhood of houses.
Okay.
So, but I'm excited because I have my own office there, but the internet wasn't working so great. So I'm at the region office right now, but I have my own office for writing. So I'm hoping to get some good writing in, and and if people have questions about fiction writing, especially, if you're in the ministry kind of area of things, I'd be glad to chat with you. And I plan to be at Space for Grace, and Judson Press is usually pretty awesome about me selling books there. So you should be able to pick up a copy, and I can sign it at Space for Grace.
That's right. So Space for Grace is in April. I think it's like April 21st, and we will be in Cleveland this time.
So if you're going to Space for Grace, I can. If you want to pick up books now, I can sign them there, or you can pick up books when I come to Cleveland. But that's a few months away. But
I have to bring my book so you can sign it.
Yes.
And like Mindi has the crown for the most frequent guest on the show. Sorry, Paul. You're gonna need to write a book or something, I guess.
Paul gets a thank you because he was one of my beta readers in the book. So he has a thank you. Meg, you'll get a thank you in my next one because you've helped me promote my books. And so you'll get one. But yeah, Paul does a thank you. And that's the last thing I'll just share. Okay. Yeah. This kind of spoils, but the dedication. I don't know if you read the dedication in this book at the very beginning, but the dedication of this one is to all who could never tell the truth of their love, to all who had to hide who they are. You are loved beyond measure. Your story matters. Because I think that's some of telling the story of McCall Jonathan and David, is telling the truth behind the stories.
So the thing that brings you joy this time.
What brings me joy? Well, having my book out in the world, and it's Advent, which is my favorite season. I prefer Advent over Christmas. I'm just one of those people I love. But we do decorate for Christmas at our house because my son, who is autistic, understand. Like, you could literally ask him this question in September: What's next? Halloween. What's after Halloween? Thanksgiving. Then Christmas. And so, like, Thanksgiving's over, Christmas begins.
Yeah, but I appreciate him and the way he opens gifts.
Yeah. And we do Advent every night. We light a candle, we read a devotional, we sing, we say the Lord's Prayer together, we sing a couple Christmas carols, and then he gets his chocolate from the calendar. But last night, because it was Advent calendar start on the 1st. So today he'll get chocolate. Yesterday we had to improvise a bit with some cookies. But we started with our Advent candle. So it brings me a lot of joy. It's being in our new house, decorating for the holidays. It snowed, big snowstorm here in Wisconsin this weekend. So it feels cozy for the holidays. I'm hoping to read some good books. I wanted to show you all my new home office, but I came to the region office instead because of internet issues. But my home office, I have 2 shelves of books that are unread books. So I've got a lot of reading to do.
Well, when book 3 comes out and we do this, then hopefully we won't have internet issues. And
I feel like, so this is the funny thing. I always, for some reason, I have internet issues when I'm on this show. Last time it was the work office, the region office, my old region office had internet issues, so I did it from home.
Wow.
And so this time it was the home internet that was having issues, so I came here.
Wow. I don't know how I should feel about that.
It's not you, Meg. It's just us. So
maybe it is.
All right. It's been great to be on the show.
Yeah, and we thank everybody for watching, for supporting Mindi and her books and the show and all the things. If you want to watch more episodes, you can find them on YouTube. Don't look them up on Facebook. You'll never find them because they delete them after 30 days now. So, but they're on Facebook or they're on YouTube, and you can just Google it. You can find it. But go and support Mindi if you can, and her books. And
and Ramona, be sure to send us either send Meg or me your address so we can send you the book.
Yeah, and we'll see everybody next time. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
You're a fan.